Good afternoon. My name is Chris Demers. I'm an Extension Program Manager at the University of Florida IFAS School of Forest, Fisheries, and Geomatics Sciences. I run our Florida Land Steward Extension Program here at the school. And the purpose of this program is to help and encourage private landowners to actively manage their lands for multiple benefits, environmental, economic, and social benefits. This is the fourth installment in our webinar series on hurricane preparation and recovery. And this one is entitled Recovering from the Storm. We're going to talk about things that you can do after the storm, post-storm. We'll be talking about things that's to do within a week of the storm, and then when it's safe to do so, within a month of the storm, things you can do out there on the property to assess damage and triage activities that can take place to recover. Before we get started with the presentation, though, I do want to go over a couple housekeeping details. I want to encourage you to use the question and answer feature on the Teams webinar button there. There's a question and answer button. I prefer if you use that to ask questions and not the chat. I will be placing some links. I already have actually placed a link in the chat to our post program evaluation. Speaking of which, I encourage you to access that at that link. That's also in the chat. Very short evaluation, take probably about a minute or less to fill it out. And then the materials for this presentation, as well as for the other presentations in this series, are at that link there. I'll show you exactly how to navigate to the materials once you're at that link. This is what the home page looks like. And if you go down to that fourth item, recordings, links, and materials for upcoming and past webinars, everything is at that link. You'll see a page, and right at the top, you'll see 2023 events, workshop, webinars, tours, and then you can find the webinar series and everything that's available associated with this series there. All right, so we use several sources to put together this presentation. The first of those is this Pine Forest Landowners Guide. This is put together by several partners, along with the USDA and the Forest Service, taking you through the things you can do to prepare for a hurricane and recover from a hurricane, and also some considerations to build a resilient forest operation so that when a storm hits, you're set up to be the most resilient operation as possible so you can make it through those types of events. We've also got a publication that came out back in 2018, I believe, 2019, Prepare Your Forest Property for Hurricane Season. This particular presentation references another publication called Assessment and Management of Hurricane Damaged Timberland. It kind of goes through the triage process of assessing damage. And then, of course, tips and feedback and lessons learned from the field over the last several years. So the book, the Pine Forest Landowners Guide, goes through these sections: building a resilient operation, and long-term planning and maintenance. That was one of the webinars in this year. We kind of went through those section 2 and 3 about long-term and short-term planning, and then section 4 is on post-hurricane recovery, and that's where we're at now. And a lot of those things, the post-storm recovery and restoration after the storm, kind of goes back to building that resilient operation. That's kind of how that book is set up. So things you can do within a week of the storm when it's things are still in a bit of chaos, might not be safe yet, depending on the severity of the storm to go out. There's some things that we can do to get started with with documentation and getting our act together. Want to first make sure that all of our essentials are in place. We want to make sure our family is safe, make sure that we are safe. There's a really excellent disaster preparation recovery handbook that that IFAS put together along with several partners. That disaster preparation and recovery handbook that's got some really good tips and essentials for a disaster, hurricanes and other disasters. So number one, goes without saying, make sure that you're safe and that you're staying tuned to emergency information alerts best that you can. And along with the preparations that you've taken, make sure you've got supplies for 72 hours to make it through that first few days after the storm. So if it's safe to go out and tour the property, it's good. You know, of course, it's a good idea to take a look around and kind of assess things from a distance. Walk or ride the property boundaries and roads if you can to assess damage to the timber, to the roads, gates, fences, stream crossings. Number one, use caution after the storm. Sites that are impacted may not be safe. Roads might be washed out, trees may be down. But most importantly, power lines could be down as well, and you want to stay away from those. When you're crossing streams and going over culverts, make sure those things are all intact and safe to cross before doing so. Make sure the ground is intact, not compromised. Photos and video, it goes back to the documentation phase that we went through in preparing for the storm. We want to make sure that we're documenting the damage. So having before pictures, which goes back to the second webinar in this series, is really important. So you have those before photos, and then you're going to go out and take after photos, taking pictures of those stands after the storm so that you can fully document the damage and showing exactly what happened, when and where. And if you can include written notes about what you're seeing, about what we're seeing, and if possible, it's a good idea to sketch these out on a map to show where the damage is taking place. And this after documentation can be used with your pre-hurricane to clearly show your losses. Some disaster assistance program will become available well after the storm in a lot of cases, sometimes even months, depending on the severity and how many people are trying to get signed up for assistance. And sometimes you can only receive assistance if you've got documentation of the damage. And it's a good idea to have your inventory handy if you have that. In general, if you've got a lot of value in timber, it's a good idea to have a timber inventory, or a cruise as they sometimes call it, just basically an assessment of your of the timber, how much is in each product class, and some assessment of the value. You can get online, once you get power restored, get online and check the FSA office. As we've mentioned in past webinars in this series and all along, it's really a good idea to have that Farm Service Agency paperwork filled out. There's 3 or 4 forms to get filled out and get you in the system. And then when a disaster strikes, you're already connected to the information and to those programs and contacts. So fill those out ahead of time. It's a good idea to get into your FSA office and get those filled out. And there's an office locator there at that link. All the links in this presentation are all active if you access the PDF of the presentation. So it's a good way to get to the links. It's on that PDF, the presentation that's on that materials page. You might also check with your local cooperative extension service office and the Florida Forest Service county forester to see what other assistance might be available. And make some contacts and check out the disaster resource page on the USDA. They've got a nice disaster assistance recovery tool that you can go through. You can plug in your information about your property, what kind of damage, what kind of operation, and it'll basically put out a nice kind of report of the assistance programs that might be applicable to your situation that you can apply for. Some examples of USDA disaster assistance programs. Some of these are by the Farm Service Agency. Some are by the NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Service. That first one is probably the most common program that's authorized after major storms, the Emergency Forest Restoration Program, or EFRP. After a major storm, the Congress will authorize funding available to help forest landowners to restore the forest stands on their properties that might have been damaged by the hurricane or the disaster. So it's a good idea to get your paperwork in so you can immediately apply for that assistance when it's available. Other programs that are provided by other parts of the USDA, the NRCS Emergency Watershed Program, Flood Easement Program, and of course a lot of us are familiar with the EQIP program or the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. Those are year-round program. You have a year-round program that has different sign-up periods, and they have assistance, financial assistance, technical assistance for all kinds of conservation objectives that you might have, and they've got some rehabilitation programs, and they can provide financial assistance to repair and prevent soil erosion that could be impacted by disasters. And also within a week, it's a good idea to get your paperwork together and begin the claims process if you're holding insurance for property. If you've got timber insurance, it's a good time to start getting the paperwork and assessments and documentations together for those. Of course, insurance claims take a long time to resolve, and so it's a good time to start the paperwork as soon as you can. So it's a good time within a week. It's a good time to get that stuff going. All right, to do within a month, it's going to take some time to assess the damage in our stands. So this is a triage process that we can go to prioritize harvest, assess the damage, and prioritize harvesting if that's necessary, and restoration if that's necessary. You might not have to do anything depending on the severity of the storm. All right, triage time, getting to know what the damage is in the stand. So following your initial assessment of infrastructure, areas of timber damage, we can work with a forester, or we can do some of this ourselves. As I said before, if you've got a lot of damage, or excuse me, if you have a lot of value timber on your property or in your operation, it's a good idea to, number one, have an inventory, and number two, to work with a forester on getting that inventory. And foresters can, of course, assist with a lot of aspects of your timber management. And the assessment that you do along with your forester is going to help you to determine salvage value, forest stands, and the follow-up management needs. We might have to do some thinning. We might have to do a clear cut. We might have to replant. We might need to do a pre-commercial thinning to remove damaged young trees that might not be marketable yet. And of course, all of this should be based on long-term goals and objectives that are in our management plan. And of course, economic feasibility. All right, so we're going to basically be going from very minor damage, starting with minor damage, and then we're going to go all the way through to severe damage and what may be necessary in those cases. So after the storm, and we're looking through and foreseeing some minor bending, leaning, things of this nature, trees in this category are probably going to recover naturally and not a priority for immediate salvage. If there are minor wounds on the trees, less than a square foot in size, those will often recover on their own as well naturally. Probably don't need to harvest. So no, really, if you've got this type of minor damage after a storm, it's not necessary to do much. You're going to want to monitor things, make sure you don't have insect problems, but overall, you're going to be okay if you've got minor leading and minor wounds. If we've got broken tops, but most of the crown is intact, the trees are reasonably straight, free from severe crown loss. These will likely survive and can be retained. They don't need to be removed. So you gotta want to monitor, keep an eye on these trees, make sure that that you don't have any insects or disease problems setting in. But overall, these trees should recover. Uprooted trees. Trees are fallen over completely intact on the ground, and if they're not severely bent or broken, these are less likely to have severe internal damage to the wood and can usually be salvaged. If these trees are in the solid wood product size class, in other words, a little over 10 inches diameter at 4.5 feet from the ground, they could be susceptible to insects and fungi that can degrade the wood. So it's a really good idea to remove those if you can within 4 to 6 weeks of the storm. So within a month, we're going to want to salvage trees that are fallen over that aren't bent or otherwise structurally compromised. Those are still going to be good. Of course, a caveat to that is local markets could be flooded with timber at this point, at this time. So depending on how widespread the storm was, how bad the impacts are, there may or may not be markets available. Harvesters, loggers might be out in the woods really busy, might not get the best price. But if your salvage price is reasonable, it's a good idea to remove them and get whatever value you can. It likely won't be the best value that you could have gotten out of those trees if a storm didn't happen, but at least you can get some value out. And otherwise, you can monitor these areas, these stands, for insect and disease outbreaks that could be originating from uprooted trees. Severely bent or snapped main stems or severe broken tops. This is pretty severe damage. These stems, these trees likely have some internal wood damage and can really only be sold for lower value products. That's pulpwood, mulch, or firewood. If you can get a logger in there to get those out. Otherwise, they're just gonna rot on site. So that's just pulpwood value, regardless of how big those trees are. They could have been saw timber sized trees, pole sized trees, but if they're snapped, they're likely not going to be salvageable. So we're going to want to harvest those when possible, but not a really high value, a high priority in terms of their value. We've got trees with major wounds, bigger than a square foot in size. I apologize for the blurry photo there, but that tree in the foreground there has some pretty good sized wounds on it, multiple wounds. Go monitor these types of situations. If they got big wounds on trees from branches coming down or anything coming through and hitting those, it's a good idea to remove them if the wounds are larger than a square foot in size. They're going to be susceptible to insects. So harvest those as soon as you can, and of course prioritize the highest value stems. If you get big straight trees, those are going to be the ones you're going to want to harvest as soon as you can. 4 to 6 weeks is a general good guideline for that type of salvage. So we're going to prioritize our harvesting based on this triage of the damage. So estimate your percentage of trees that are in each of the damage classifications. Lightly damaged stands may not need salvage and can be left alone. Moderately damaged stands, you might need to decide between partial or complete harvest based on the damage level and the distribution of that damage in the stand. And then, of course, severe catastrophic damage, kind of like what we had after Hurricane Michael out in the Panhandle back in 2018. They're going to require a complete salvage operation to recoup any of that value, and you're going to start all over again. And of course, we're going to want to prioritize the trees of higher value. Those are going to be considered for removal first. So saw timber, poles, ply logs, veneer trees, those high quality trees, uh, large diameter, straight trees, get those out 4 to 6 weeks before the blue stain fungus sets in. After that, once the fungus sets in, the value is going to decrease, and then they're really only going to be good for pulpwood. And then if it is pulpwood valued material that you're looking at, it can be removed within 8 to 12 months. So you've got basically almost up to a year to get the pulpwood stuff out. But your high value stuff, 4 to 6 weeks within that first month if you can. And then we get back to building a resilient operation for replanting. If it's necessary to replant, you want to, take a step back. Was the species that you had on the property to begin with, was that the best species for your objectives and for the site? That's a good question to ask yourself when you're replanting, and go forward from there. Get the best species for the site, for your objectives when you're starting all over again. Proper site preparation is key, as always, regardless of the objectives. You're going to want to really take good care and get that site prepared. Um, After hurricanes, there's risks of wildfires. Invasive species can become a problem, especially kogan grass can move in on disturbed sites. Um, and of course, the increased fuel loads and site disturbance is going to be a big factor. So combination of prescribed fire and herbicide treatments may be necessary before planting. And here we get back to building that resilient operation, getting the right species to the right site, and the right site preparation to start that stand off strong and healthy. And there it is. There's that, back to the building a resilient operation and getting yourself ready for resilience and sustainability. I want to go through this part of the presentation as well. I included these contacts. These are really good contacts to have in your phone, in your Rolodex. Back when we used to use Rolodexes, yeah, if you've got high value in your stand, it's a really good idea. If you got a kind of maybe a larger property and really interested in timber, managing for timber, you want to maximize some of those values, economic values, get good wildlife habitat. It's a good idea to work with a consulting forester, and they can really help with all phases of management. In Florida, we don't have a registered forester program or a licensed forester program like they do in Georgia and Alabama. So there are some credentials that you can look for. Strongly recommend that you get a forester who's a member of the Society of American Foresters and also a member of the Association of Consulting Foresters. Look for those credentials when you're selecting a consulting forester. We've got a good publication there on selecting a consultant and some of those credentials. They're active in the Florida Forestry Association. You generally want a forester that's engaged with the latest technology, getting continuing education, things of that nature. And then, of course, there's the whole partnership of professionals out there that are working together to help private landowners manage their land. So your Florida Forest Service County Forester is a wonderful contact. They can help you with getting a management plan together. Your Florida Forest Service Best Management Practices Forester, they can help you to address roads and drainage, stream crossings, wetland protection, those types of things. Also, there's best management practices to protect wildlife species of special concern. Your IFAS County Extension agent, a lot of times they're a bit more engaged with the agricultural type operations. Very likely you are also engaged in those operations, and so it's a good idea to get in contact with your extension agent. They're connected to information and might know of some assistance and programs that are also available that could be of assistance. Your Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, landowner assistance program biologists are wonderful resource connected to a lot of programs, a lot of assistance. They help out quite a bit with USDA assistance programs and cost share programs. Really a great contact if you're interested in wildlife habitat and just overall good forestry and good land management. The USDA, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, your district conservationist is a really good contact. There's various cost share assistance programs that become available throughout the year. And they can help you to get signed up with those programs. And of course, your farm servicing agent is a good contact as well. They've got different types of loan programs. They're going to be the best contact after disasters, storms. That emergency forest restoration program, farm service agency. Excuse me, the farm service agency is the contact for those. And again, get your forms filled out ahead of time with the USDA so that you're in the queue and you're ahead of you basically get yourself ahead in the line once those programs become available to get the assistance. USDA Farm Service Agency, there's the website. We've learned some lessons in past years, and back after Hurricane Michael, there was a backlog of people that were waiting on assistance. 3 years after that storm, they were still waiting, and there might still be people waiting for assistance from that program. So if you get your paperwork filled out ahead of time, you can avoid that best you can. And also you'll receive e-notifications about recovery programs after the storm. You'll get those notifications automatically. And if you've already got your farm records turned in, if it's been a few years, make sure they're all up to date and current. The Florida Forestry Association is a great way to get connected to the local timber industry, get to know some of the consultants and the loggers, silvicultural contractors that are operating in your area. They have regional meetings in different times of the year. They also have an annual meeting that's coming up later this month in August of 2023. That's a great organization to get connected with. You might have heard about the Florida Tree Farm Program or the American Tree Farm System. If you're certified in the American Tree Farm System, your wood is a part of the chain of custody of the Sustainable Forestry Initiative and/or the program for the Endorsement for Forest Certification Programs, which is an international certification organization. So your wood coming off your property at the end of the production cycle after harvest, when it's processed into wood products, that wood product, whether it be solid wood products or paper products, has that SFI label on it, or the PE or the PEFC label, showing that wood came from a sustainable source. In other words, your forest, your tree farm, which is sustainably managed according to a plan, and you're following all the best managed practices and doing everything you need to do to produce that wood in a sustainable manner. All right, I will take questions now. Please use the Q&A function, and we'll reserve the chat for some other information that can be provided there. I've got the link to the evaluation is there, so please fill out that evaluation. I'll stand by for questions. Is there anybody out there? Hello, hello. All right, go ahead and conclude this webinar right now. There's the link to the evaluation. Materials can be accessed at our webpage right there. I want to thank all of our partners and supporters that provide support for the Florida Land Steward Program, the Florida Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, USDA, Florida Forestry Association, Florida Tree Farm Program, and the SFI Implementation Committee. All these partners and others are extremely supportive of the program, either financially or intellectually, morally. Great partners. Thank them all. With that, thank you for joining us. Keep your eye on the tropics, and we'll see you next time.